Okay, so I think we can get started as more people trickle in. Welcome to the third week of the Calm Flooding Lunch and Learn series. Uh, my name is Jake Kolonowski, and I'm the coordinator for Calm, the collaborative action for Lake Michigan coastal resilience. Each week we've been having a presentation and some time for questions at the end around a flooding topic. This week's topic is GreenSeams, an innovative flood management program, and I'm excited to hand things over to our presenter, Kristin Schultheis, Senior Project Manager for Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District, to tell us more. Kristin?
All right. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, everybody, for inviting me here today. I'm Kristin Schultheis with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District and manager of our GreenSeams and Working Soils programs. And as part of a series 2 weeks ago, you all heard from Kevin, who gave an overview of the work that we're doing to address floodwater management. And then last week you heard from Mark Natag in regards to our watercourse division and the work that he's doing. And so today I'm going to talk about GreenSeams and another program called Working Soils and how that fits in our overall approach to floodwater, managing for floodwater at a watershed scale. So I'm really excited to be here. I love managing these programs, and I'll also have some examples of how these sites have been working in regards to some of our recent storm events. So a little bit of a very quick background in case anybody hasn't been on these presentations the past 2 weeks. So we are Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District. We are located in Milwaukee in southeastern Wisconsin, and we're on the shores of Lake Michigan. And so our core initiatives, as said in our name, is to manage for sewage or wastewater, but we also manage for floodwater. And partly because we are a regional government agency, so we are able to complete projects across municipal and county lines, but also because it's in our interest to make sure we inhibit stormwater or floodwater from entering our sewer system and potentially overwhelming the system. And so on this map, you can see my cursor. This is a blue dashed line. It's beyond our actual sewer service area. It represents the area in which we are planning for year 2050. And within that area and within our sewer service area, we serve 29 municipalities and over 1.1 million customers. So back in 1999, after some major storms and flooding events, the district embarked upon how do we rethink about our approach to flooding and its management. And so the first thing that they said is, well, let's just solve our existing flooding issues. And that is what's shown here as our water course and what Mark talked about last week. Let's revitalize our urbanized rivers. Let's remove the concrete. Let's reestablish the hydrologic connection from the surface into the subsurface, into the groundwater systems, and into our rivers. Let's reestablish a floodplain so water has room to swell, to overbank, and then come back into the banks. So then the next thing is, well, how about also reducing the future risk to flooding? And we do that in two ways. One is through policy and stormwater ordinances, where we require new developments or redevelopments to manage water where it falls. And we do that through green infrastructure. So that can be cisterns, permeable pavers, bioswales is what is shown here in the picture, rooftop gardens, rain gardens, anything that we can do to slow the flow and add storage onto individual developments. And then the third way is, well, let's preserve those undeveloped lands, those natural systems that are already doing the work. And that includes wetlands, floodplains, hydric soils, those really dark soils that absorb and store water, woodlands. They're already doing the work. And And that's what the third picture is. And we do that through land conservation. And that's what GreenSeams is all about. We preserve these natural areas that are these natural systems that are already doing the work. And so GreenSeams, and that's what the heart of it is, floodwater management through land conservation. And we use the land conservation model to preserve these sites by acquiring sites through fee simple acquisitions or through conservation easements. The map to the left shows our program area. So this green line goes all the way from southern Milwaukee County line and all the way up into Sheboygan and Fond du Lac counties, and it includes these 6 watersheds. This program started in 2001, so we're actually celebrating our 25th year. And we work with private landowners on a voluntary basis. All of this is voluntary. None of this is done by eminent domain, where we reach out to private landowners, or sometimes they reach out to us because they want to see their lands preserved. And we really focus in the headwater areas. So like the green infrastructure and our water course divisions are really working down here in our heavily urbanized areas. I'm working up here in the headwaters and the upper reaches of these watersheds, because it's an entire system, right? And so what occurs in the upper reaches of the watershed, affects downstream, and here we are in downtown Milwaukee. So what can we do to preserve and to manage flooding up here makes a huge difference to what occurs down here. And then there's a second program called Working Soils. And so you'll notice that the program area is a little different. Here we start at the northern Milwaukee County line, going into the Menominee, upper reaches of the Menominee River watershed, and then 2/3 of the Milwaukee River watershed. This area between the blue dashed line and this northern Milwaukee County line, this is now becoming there's a large conversion from agriculture to subdivisions. And so we do have numerous sites, and I'll show you an example later on where we're seeing some of our sites beginning to provide room for water to swell. And so, but the caveat is with GreenSeams that if we acquire land with active farming on it, that farmland has to come out of production. Well, this area up here is still very rural, and agricultural is the predominant land use up here. So, of course, for those landowners, they're not going to be interested. But a lot of these hydric features are associated with farmland. So we looked for programs available to do farmland conservation, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service had such a program through their agricultural land easements. So we partnered with the NRCS starting in about 2016. And with these easements, we preserve those natural systems that's important to the MMSD, but we're also preserving active farmland, which is important to NRCS. So it's just a great partnership there. Again, this is all private landowners, completely voluntary, and we only do easements. We do not do fee simple acquisitions. So how do we go about selecting sites? One, it's undeveloped private property. It has to be about at least 5 acres in size. It must include those hydric land features. But then what we're also trying to do is connect. So we're looking for other public lands, other GreenSeams sites, because we want to build corridors. We don't want to have a random parcel here, a random parcel there. We really want to build that connectivity. And so this map on the right kind of shows these green sites are existing GreenSeams properties. And through our analyses, we were able to determine, like with these rose-colored sites, that is an area that we want to target. And so that's actually helps with targeting our outreach. And therefore, we've already done kind of some pre-site selection in returns for our outreach. Then we also look at municipal land use and recreational plans. We are working outside our sewer service area. And so we want to make sure that what we're doing doesn't conflict with our municipal partners. And actually, you know, we have developed really good partnerships with our local municipalities and county parks because they might have a site that's identified that they want to see as part of their land use and recreational plans. It overlaps with our site selections of there's actually a lot of great hydric features here. And so that we can partner in on the acquisition and the overall preservation of that land. So it helps MMSD meet our mission, but it also helps the municipalities meet their missions as well. And then, of course, we look at water quality and habitat plans to see if there's some overlap there. So to date for GreenSeams, we have over 167. We have 167 properties in the program, over 6,100 acres, and 72% of those acres are considered hydric. And here you can see the various different kinds of. We have small streams, we have just pure wetland area here in Oak Creek, and then even in West Bend here we partnered with a local land trust in purchasing this woodland wetland complex, just another phenomenal parcel. And so that gets to the last point on the slide is partnerships across the watersheds. And I think that is kind of one of the unspoken benefits or successes of this program is we're really building a collaborative watershed, I guess, partnerships across the watershed to address, climate resiliency, to be honest. And I think that is, and we're all talking and we're bringing our resources together as to address a lot of these climate issues that are facing us and the southeastern Wisconsin region. And so that's what we get into. What are our co-benefits? We're reducing the future risk to flooding. That's what's important to the district, and that is what we are charged with. But what are all the other things? Well, we're looking at soil health regarding our farmlands, but also our natural lands and GreenSeams. And how we manage those lands is to improve the infiltration and recharge into our groundwater systems. We're trying to improve the subsurface biomass, the amount of organic matter that's in the subsurface that can also just absorb and store that flood water. We are then, by doing that work, we're improving biodiversity. We are addressing water quality. We're preserving open space. We're supporting our municipalities because this is a regional effort. Not one organization can address all of our climate resiliency on their own. But also, this is extremely cost effective. It is like the cost per gallon, it's less than a cent. It's like 0.01 of a cent of what it costs for us in GreenSeams to preserve these natural areas compared to like what Watercourse Division has to do in retrofitting and bringing back floodplain or our green infrastructure folks. It is super cost effective to follow what nature is telling us to do. She's telling us where we need to preserve. She's telling us where water needs to be stored because that's where a wetland is. That's where there's a floodplain. That's where we have these super dark, rich hydric soils. She's telling us where to go, and we're just following her lead and making sure that those natural features, that take millennia to develop are preserved. Because as hard as we try, and we are a building full of engineers, we cannot exactly mimic what nature does naturally. And so let's just preserve that in the first place. So here's an example of Ryan Creek Corridor, southwestern Milwaukee County in Franklin. And looking at this map, there's 9 parcels here. Probably took us about 12 years or so to acquire each of these sites. This blue line, this is Ryan Creek, and all of this is just wet. And so over these parcels, 277 acres along the creek have been preserved. And and there's a lot of partnership that comes into doing this. So we partner with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources for Knowles Nelson stewardship funding for these acquisitions. We partnered with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because there's about 81 acres in this parcel down here, and right here that we turned from agricultural production into restored prairie. And then what we do is like these parcels in green. What we then did is we transferred the ownership to WDNR, and they now have incorporated it into their Big Muskego Lake State Natural Area. And then this parcel right here, we transferred ownership of that to the Milwaukee Area Land Conservancy. And so they take on ownership, but what we do is then we put on a conservation easement to protect those, if you want to call it assets. You need to protect those and make sure that they are not developed. And then what are all the climate resiliency benefits? Of course, well, now, we're preserving these floodplain areas so that there's room for floodwater to go. We have, we're improving biodiversity and biomass by restoring native habitat. And this is a major migratory flyway, so we want to also preserve that habitat too. Interestingly, now, this particular 40-acre site, for about 20 years, we had been reaching out to that landowner, showing interest in its acquisition. This area, you can see a lot of the darkness. That's all hydric soils and wetlands. This area, we have seen it flood. But the thing is, we're bound by an appraisal value. So we will not acquire, or we will not offer a price over appraisal. And this particular landowner wanted more. And so this was sold to a developer. There are now going to be 140 houses on this property, and they are going to be developed in areas where there are hydric soils, and just know that that hydrologic footprint doesn't disappear, and so it is of note. So Kevin potentially described some what occurred back in August. We had a 14-inch storm, and so I wanted to show two examples here of GreenSeams sites in action. Here in this particular area, in that same storm, they received over 9 inches. Here we have two GreenSeams sites together. This is the Little Menominee River. This is the Little Menominee Creek. And this photo is taken from the bridge. It's hard to tell, but the water's clearly overbanked, and we've never seen this for this site. This entire area was flooded. And we tried, and for this site up here, this entire area is flooded. And usually we have no problem crossing this creek right here. And that's what we're allowing. We're allowing, this natural phenomenon of flooding. We're giving water space to overbank, flood the land, and then come back. And that's just a natural phenomenon. And here we have development pressure from subdivision. This particular farm field is now undergoing development, and I know over here these fields are also undergoing development pressure. So that's where GreenSeams really comes in. We're preserving these lowland areas for flooding to occur adjacent to development, and that can exist. That can coexist of development and preservation. Here's a site in Oak Creek. In that same storm, they received over 5 inches. I'm standing here on Pennsylvania Avenue looking west, and it's just this entire area is a couple feet deep of water. And here's Oak Creek, and we have the blue area is Milwaukee County Parkland. The green area is GreenSeams. And so again, we have this partnership, this corridor. And then right here, this area is at least 100 acres. And so if you can imagine, we have over 100 acres of just a couple feet of standing water. And then here's a final example from farmer up in Germantown. They received over 9 inches. And I'm going to play this and show you what's going on, because this field, He received over 9 inches of rain in 24 hours. You are looking uphill. It's kind of hard to see. This is in August, so he just harvested wheat. This right here, well, and what he's showing you is that the runoff is crystal clear. This fellow implements several kinds of conservation practices of no-till, cover crops, and then in a moment we'll be able to see, well, right here is a prairie strip that bisects the field where he's using native plants to also help with reducing soil erosion. And I just feel like this is such a success story of conservation, and so many of our farmers are implementing these practices because they do care about clean water. They do want to see healthy soils because that is their livelihood. And that's all I've got.
Thanks for the great presentation, Kristin. So now we do have time for a few questions. So feel free to raise your hand or come off mute or type your question in the chat, and we can answer those. Yeah, Adam.
Presentation was really great. So thinking about like a community or area that wants to replicate this, like what advice do you have sort of starting from scratch? Like how can someone, what have you learned? What can you go about initiating something like this?
Yeah, it is your partnerships. Like when the district first started looking at this, there was a huge pushback, 25 years ago. What is a government agency doing buying land outside of their sewer service area? I mean, are they going to put in a huge deep tunnel or something? And, here we are 20, 25 years later, and now everybody's seeing what's going on. And so, the partnerships are completely different. But that's what it is. It is reaching out to your county parks, your other municipalities, and saying, how do we address flooding, and how about let's preserve these lands in the first place? And I think that's what's important. Like if I go back a few slides here, looking at the municipal land use and recreational plans, there's benefits to everybody here. And so I think that's what's going to take is getting, starting those initial meetings with partners so that everybody's also really clear what the mission is. And we're not against development. We're for preserving these types of sites. And that's why I want to make sure it's really important that development and preservation can coexist. And then it's also then bringing in funders and so on in this, to be part of that conversation. I think that's where it really starts, so that there's that outward message, because that outreach and that messaging is incredibly important for private landowners and developers and everybody. Like no, this all can coexist. But yeah, I would love to see this be replicated elsewhere, and would definitely be willing to help with those conversations if needed.
Thanks.
You're on mute, Jake.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I was just saying, I have a question for you. You talked about some of the co-benefits of GreenSeams on one of your slides. I was wondering, are some or all of GreenSeams properties open to the public?
Yes, they are. So sites that are owned by MMSD, we own about 2,400 acres. All of those are open for recreation, for passive recreation. But about 2/3 of our sites are privately owned, so we have a conservation easement on them. So unless they've been transferred to a municipality or to a local land trust, those are open to the public. But if they are still privately owned, no, they are not. But on a lot of our sites, we really encourage hiking, birding. We will allow on certain of our sites hunting, and we have developed a partnership with, for instance, UW Milwaukee to be able to do research on our sites as well, and land management as part of their curriculum. So that's been a really neat partnership. That's also more recent.
Thank you. Any other questions for Kristin? Adam?
Yeah, I got another one for you. So as you're like setting forth the program, it's easy to see conceptually how GreenSeams preservation is going to help with things like flood resiliency and water quality. Has it been a challenge to kind of maybe quantify that as the program's growing, or what your goals are and how you're progressing towards the goal of reducing flooding?
Right.
How
It
does that
is
happen?
because, yeah, no, I appreciate where you're going for. So we use estimates of how much the storage capacity of these sites, and it's still in my mind a loosey-goosey number. But we do, we estimate, our GreenSeams sites alone, not our working soils, but just GreenSeams alone has the capacity to store over 3 billion gallons of water. And then we've also tried to estimate, well, what is the flood? What's the value of that? And that's also in my mind, not a perfect number. And and that's in the millions. That I can't remember that number off the top of my head, but it is in the millions. And I know there are papers out there trying to better quantify what that is, but I can definitely say, like that site in Oak Creek, if I can move down there. Like here you have all of these subdivisions. And, if they allowed development in here, I mean, there would be a lot of flood damage due to flooding. And I think that's the concept. Like, again, flooding is a natural phenomenon. And the only time flooding becomes destructive is when floodwater is restricted, right? Restricted by our own development. And so yeah, again, that's what we're trying to do, is just give that water room to flow. But I know it is those metrics, they're a little loosey-goosey, but they are there.
Thanks. Yeah, I know it's not perfect way to estimate it, but it's
Yeah,
good to hear about kind of how you're trying to capture it in
yeah,
some quantity.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, we got time for maybe one more question if anyone has one. And it can be me again because I have another question, Kristin. So I was wondering about the future of GreenSeams. Like, what are the goals going forward, or is there anything you're trying to move into with the program? What's the future look like?
So our current goal is to have a minimum of 10,000 acres in the program by 2035. And I think we're realizing that, you know, to continue on to probably, actually, Kevin mentioned 20,000 acres, because I think now, especially, here in Oak Creek, and if I move to a map, so don't mind my quick movements here, but we have a lot of land stored, preserved right in here. And this is an area of a lot of subdivision development. And I think now, 25 years later, when this was mostly farmland, we're seeing, the results come to fruition. And the fact then, we're slowing the flow and protecting all of our infrastructure down below. Excuse me, my phone is ringing. Let me shut that off. So that, I think that is the vision. And what we're also trying to do is just, yeah, that is our general vision. Is it 10,000 acres? Actually, maybe we should be continuing to bump it up. And Originally, we did not include Sheboygan and Fond du Lac counties as part of our program area, but what we heard from our partners there is that they're undergoing development pressure, and they asked if we can start preserving lands while before all the subdivisions come up. And so we were able to make that happen about 2 years ago and expand our program area. But I think this is where we're going to stay.
Okay. Great. Thanks. So that is all the time we have. Thanks again, Kristin. And thanks to everybody who joined. If you have more questions, please reach out to me via email and we can try to get the answer for you. And join us next week for our last Lunch and Learn to hear about community engagement and flood management projects. Thanks.
Thank you very much.